Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the PetaPixel podcast. My name is Jaron Schneider, and I've joined, as always, by Chris Nichols.
Hi. Hello, everybody.
Jordan Drake.
Hey.
And today we are joined also by Maria Yap, the Vice President of Digital Imaging at Adobe. We're here to talk to Adobe and ask them all of the questions that we've been asking you guys to send in to us. We have a bunch here on my iPad that we'll be going over. But before we do that, I do need to mention that Adobe, as a disclosure, Adobe did fly us down here and put us up locally so that we could come here and ask these questions. Now, with that out of the way, we may want to do any other history questions or explanations of why we're doing this before we get into it.
Well, I think first off, Maria, it's great to have you here. Thank you for joining us and helping us out with this. And you're a photographer first, right? We were talking about that earlier. And so, and I think all of us are coming from a history of using Adobe products for a long time, seeing the changes. So I think your insight's going to be fantastic to talk about how it's changing, what it means for new customers. So
great.
We're excited
to be here. Yeah.
Anything to add, Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, the big thing is, I think, why we're all here. We're doing a weekly podcast where we talk about the latest photo news. Adobe has been in the news a lot, and we've really felt like when we're talking about all this stuff, we're just saying, in this situation, I kind of assume Adobe's thinking this, or, we're trying to figure out why. We didn't have anyone from Adobe to come on and talk about it, or we didn't even have a contact, to be totally honest. So, in the last little while, we did have the advertising campaign that said, skip the photo shoot. Which obviously a lot of photographers, that is their livelihood, and they've been paying for Adobe software for all this time. They're financing that, and people were very upset about that. And then, just some communication issues. So we thought it made sense. Let's talk to our audience, get all of your questions, because we were just seeing a lot of comments on all the videos and the YouTube comments. Just ask them to us, we'll pass them on, and we want to just kind of clear the air, learn a little bit today, and get to the bottom of it.
I think that this will probably be the first in several steps in learning more about the people who actually make the software as opposed to the types of people that talk about stock value. I think that was that's at least my goal is if I can go back in time and I know that I met with Adobe people years and years ago. I've been doing this for 10 years, and I remember knowing this. Today we met some people again that I had already met, and I knew, and I'm glad that they're still here. So just perspectively, I think Adobe wants to try and be more communicative to the audience again.
Absolutely. And I'm, glad to be on the podcast with you to just exactly what you said, share my experiences. You mentioned I'm a photographer. Yes, when I was 16, I bought my first camera. I was the high school yearbook photographer.
Oh, I did the same thing. That's my exact same route.
Which camera was the first camera?
My first camera was the Olympus OM1 because Nikon and Canons were pretty heavy. And I was a young 16-year-old. And so I had to kind of weigh carrying around a big camera or a much lighter camera, and I love that camera.
Yeah, they still keep that tradition going, I think.
Yeah, there's
exactly.
cameras. Yeah, and there's a new OM1 too.
Yeah. So then when I went to college, I chose to study filmmaking. So I was going to pursue cinematography, took all these photography classes. I even remember learning the zone system, right? So all the classic, I shot with a 4x5 camera, which is not easy to do, including developing my own film in the darkroom and developing 4x5 in a closet. And that's really tricky if you've never done that before.
The dust spots drove me crazy. I quit.
It's so sensitive.
Yeah.
But the images, when you print them from 4x5, you expose them for maybe a second and you have a beautifully exposed image. So yes, I that's where I came from. That's what I learned. I deviated in my career to graphic design because I simultaneously was studying design and photography. And I was fortunate that when I came out of school, the Macintosh was just coming into they called it desktop publishing. That was the term at the time. And I just took to it. I was, even though I learned photography and learned graphic design, what we call the analog or the old way now, I just love this idea of translating all that digitally. And so I took to it right away. I was using Photoshop 1.0, all the classic products, Illustrator 88, and just worked as a graphic designer for, I think, about a decade, and then got an opportunity to join Adobe. And I was just so excited to come here and take my personal skills, my relationships with other creatives, and learn how to translate that into software.
And I think you're such a good resource to talk to because you've seen Adobe from almost start to finish, right? Like, well, to now, the whole progression of the, start to finish. Oh, it's
well, technically, race. Yes, Adobe's been around for about 40 years.
Yeah.
I've personally worked at the company for over 25.
Wow. So you've seen the whole digital era, for sure.
I've definitely seen the whole digital era.
Imaging goes. Yeah.
Well, I was actually going to say what Jordan said is an excellent segue into the first question.
Yeah.
So as mentioned, these are all your questions, so thank you for sending them in. This one is a YouTube comment from JW Panimation, who said, why are you touting AI as a replacement for photography in Photoshop when Photoshop is a tool used primarily by photographers?
Yes, so we are not touting AI as a replacement for photography and photographers. We see AI, and particularly generative AI is the topic, as a tool to help you ideate, explore some ideas really quickly. But by far, the vast amount of usage within Photoshop is supplementing your own images, adding to your images, removing things from your images. So it's more of the tedious tasks. Like, if I have an image and I want to extend its edges, just pulling them out. Like when we've talked to creatives and they do that and they get the generative expand and it adds a little bit more sky, a little bit more of the foreground, maybe a tree, none of them say to us, oh my goodness, you took away our creativity. They all say, thank you. And then they can get to focus on the things that they uniquely then add to the image, their unique insights, their creativity. So it's really just taking away the tedious part of the process and allowing them to get to their vision, their creativity faster.
I think the basis of this idea was that marketing image that went out.
Yes.
That said, skip the photo shoot.
Yes, that was an unfortunate headline that came out, but it was not ever the intention of. I represent the core product team. So I lead both the Photoshop development and the Lightroom development. Our job is to build a product. So it's built with hundreds of engineers around the world. And I can tell you that is not our intention. We do not build our products for that purpose. A lot of us, you met me, you met a bunch of my team today. Yeah. We all enjoy photography, whether it be on your smartphone or, on the different cameras that we've been talking about. But yeah, that's not what drives us. That's not why we build our products.
Well, one thing that's really, I would like to touch on that wasn't in the questions here is how you are training your AI, right? Because we know that there's companies out there that are just skimming the internet, pulling as many images, regardless of copyright, out to train it. So you're doing something different, right?
Very different than everybody else. Yeah. So we have the Adobe Stock Collection. So we're specifically training on content that we have licensed and we have permission to use. So we make sure that both the images coming into the training as well as the images that are being produced are all commercially safe.
So how are the photographers being compensated for that? Because they put it up on stock for other, agencies to use, things like that, people to license it. But now it's I think some people are realizing it's being used in a way that wasn't initially what they were expecting. Is there any sort of additional compensation or any communication back and forth with the photographers about that?
Yeah, there's definitely communication on that and policies. I'll be honest, I don't run that department, so I don't have the specifics on the compensation plan, but I know there is a compensation policy. Yeah.
It was interesting talking to a lot of the leads here today. It was actually really enlightening to talk to them. And I think it's very clear you really
and they weren't computers, right?
They weren't. No, they were.
These were human beings.
And
with
very
emotions.
human.
Okay.
Very human. We talked to the Photoshop team. We talked to the Lightroom team a lot, and yeah, they're all on that level. They're all just so interested in imaging, in creating a product that their users are going to love. And I know a lot of them express frustration at the situation and misinterpretation of like the terms of use and stuff like that. So it was really nice to see how dedicated they are, but also how they shared those same frustrations. And they're like, yeah, that's not our intention. That's not what we wanted. We really just want to make the best product possible. We love and respect the people that started that. So that was, and that use our product.
Yeah, no, I can definitely guarantee you that in our heart of hearts, what motivates us is our customers and their creativity. Yeah. That literally is. Like when we create features or we see some really interesting new capabilities, we're all doing that in service of our customers and creativity. Like, that's the thing that motivates us. Like, if you're saying, like, Maria, like, why do you wake up every morning? It's to do that.
Yeah.
It's to literally find ways to better unlock people's creativity. It's not to, replace the photo shoot by far.
Yeah.
Okay. The next question is from Jennifer Call. Does Adobe have plans to use AI tools to help us assign metadata to our photos that help us stay organized and recall photos for use in projects? Tagging, keywording, etc. is cumbersome as it is, and would love to see improvements to staying organized.
So I don't know how much you guys have covered like AI on your podcast, but I want to separate artificial intelligence and machine learning from generative AI. So the
I think that's
last
helpful because I mentally do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the last topic we talked about was specifically generative AI, where we're generating pixels for the user. There is before that, the predecessor before that was just artificial intelligence and machine learning. And at its basic core, it's something like if I needed to teach the computer what an apple was, I would show them pictures of apples, right? You'd say, so you'd label a picture. Here's a picture of an apple. It would say it's an apple, right? So that's what you do. So that's what's called machine learning, is literally training a machine to understand a label. So that when you show it a new image, it's like, can it tell now that new image is an apple?
Right.
So that's just the basic AI ML. So yes, we have trained AI ML models to recognize different things in your images. So today in Lightroom, across the entire system, you don't have to tag anything. You could just type in flower, and it'll find all your flowers. You could type in, we have face recognition, so you can type, I could look at like, okay, Maria, find me all Marias in my images. So that's there today. And it doesn't use the metadata. There are also other search techniques where it can use, a camera lens, location, like all the stuff that is in the file inherently.
Yeah.
But if you were just like, I didn't tag anything and I just want to find the color blue, or like you could type those things in and it'll start to pull those up for you.
And I think this is important too. Do you have to upload your footage to the cloud? Or your photos? I'm talking video man now. But do your photos have to go into the cloud for that machine learning to take place?
It does.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right. Okay.
All right. So the answer is that exists. The next one is from Caleb Thomas Media. I believe this is a Caleb that is a...
He loaned us a lens that doesn't exist according to Canon.
Yeah,
So thank you for that, Caleb.
Oh, wow.
So Caleb says, Dear Adobe, I am a boudoir photographer. My work is ethical, artistic, and empowering. However, it apparently goes against the terms of service of your new generative tools such as generative fill and generative expand. As such, I am unable to utilize these tools for which I pay a monthly subscription fee. Now, I obviously understand the potential bad faith and illegal ways these tools could be used, and understand there are probably even some Section 230 issues at hand. However, it seems there must be a better way to mitigate these while still allowing folks whose work is perfectly ethical and valid to use the most up-to-date offerings for which they pay. Do you plan on updating your terms of service to allow for my type of work, or am I just out of luck using these tools going forward?
So I would say you're not out of luck. It's definitely an area that we constantly research and explore. We're constantly looking at ways to better understand what's happening in the image overall and what is the intention of the image. Right now, yes, we do have a pretty high bar where if we see too much skin, we won't do a fill because we don't know what's about to happen. But we agree, there are artistic uses, legitimate uses. So we are constantly trying to understand better ways that we can detect that so that we can go ahead and let you continue, using that feature functionality. So I would say it's not a done thing. It's just, it has to continue to evolve. And so we started with a pretty high bar, just like if we saw, like there's people that have given us lots of different cases. Sometimes like, dogs or puppies look, to the AI will look like too much skin. So it's like, I didn't do anything. It's like, yes, we understand.
No chihuahuas.
So no chihuahuas.
None.
So we're constantly definitely collecting, and we're also always asking ourselves, is there a different approach or a different way for us to look at this?
Yeah.
So that we can better understand the contents of the image and both allow you to continue as an artist, and not try to censor or edit you. But right now we have to start with a pretty high bar until we understand how we can lower it by understanding more context about the image.
Yeah. Can I just elaborate on that then as well with just photographers in general? How do you guys consult, or who do you consult as far as the photography community goes when making these decisions?
Yeah, so we have a very active base of what we call pre-release customers that are in our, like what we call our private betas that get early access to our products. We have relationships with a lot of photographers. In the industry, we have a program that was called Lightroom Ambassadors. So we have a constant flow of making sure that we're staying in tuned with the professional community and the trends that are happening. So yeah, that it's just various routes. I don't like that. Just gives you a couple examples.
That's cool.
You good, Jordan?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I just can't really see you very easily through Chris. So
I'll do this when I'm talking.
Chris, go invisible. Just put your invisible mode on.
I'll just relax.
NKN Visuals on YouTube asks, my question is, given the current industry push towards inclusion of NPUs, neural processing units, in the latest generations of processors, and Adobe's increasing inclusion of AI features in their various programs, will any of the AI features in Adobe products be able to run locally on devices through those NPUs? I remember sometime back AMD had made a video saying they were working with Adobe to get their NPUs to work in Premiere Pro, and they hinted at similar undergoing collaborative efforts on Photoshop as well, but since then there's been no word on it.
Yeah, so obviously we don't pre-announce the things that we haven't finished yet, or
classic company not telling us what they're planning. It's not like everyone does that. I say that because Japanese companies always say we don't comment on future products. It's like and then they don't.
So I don't have a product and I don't have an announcement, but by far, absolutely. I mean, we wouldn't be in technology if we weren't constantly looking at the latest, innovations that are available to us. And we definitely see that bringing models down to your device closer to where the image is going to be another unlock. Because instead of having to send the data to the cloud, get the AI or the model to happen and then come back and give it back to you, if it was right on the device, it would happen a lot faster.
Earlier today, someone mentioned, I can't remember who said it, but there is a difference depending on what smartphone you're using. If it has like a dedicated NPU like an iPhone would, it does it on device, but if you're on an Android device that doesn't, it sends it to the cloud.
Some of our models, we keep flipping back and forth between generative models and non-generative models, but yes, some of our models do run on device today. Like denoise, lens blur, selection is a very popular one where we have to use a model to help get the accurate selections of your pixels. And so, but then there are some devices that don't have that processing or capability or can't support our full application. So then we use the fallback of the cloud. So right now, one of the benefits of developing for the cloud is I can deploy something on the cloud and then have, you could all have access to it off of all your different products and, all the different surfaces. And then over time, what we do is then we try to bring it down to the device so that we could then take advantage of the performance of the device. But to your point, if the device can't support that, we can always fall back to the cloud. So it just gives us options on like speed of deployment, leveraging the latest devices of what's the right way to bring the feature to the customer.
Is that a big challenge, having to make software for so many potential devices that people are going to be using? Not only operating systems.
No, Chris, it's easy.
Maybe that's why you'd be less mad at us for like not going faster. But absolutely. I mean, think about like how many different versions. So let's just take Photoshop. So Photoshop's on Mac and Windows, but now Mac has two different core platforms, and it's obviously transitioned. Windows has two different. So now I have 4 different targets, right, that I have to run on, plus then variations and versions prior, because we want to be able to run on older versions, the latest versions. Believe it or not, those platform companies push us to really, use every bit of their new hardware so you can show it off. But then how do I do that and run on something older for existing customers, right? So there's that balance. Then you go off to mobile, all the different Android. I think there's someone was telling me like 15,000 different configurations between the device and the operating system. So don't discount that as well. Oh yeah, it's a huge challenge. Right. So some of the things that we try to do is we try to componentize capabilities. We try to provide things as services so that it can get broken down into sort of smaller pieces that then I can more easily incorporate into all the different platforms that exist. But oh yeah, I mean it's like a blessing and a curse. It's really cool that you can take advantage of all these platforms, but it doesn't happen overnight, and that's probably why everyone gets mad. Like, why didn't you put it on this thing before that thing or this thing? But like we do our best. We genuinely do our best to make those right choices, but it is definitely a challenge.
The next couple questions are kind of like software performance and availability based. There's only a couple of them.
Okay.
Photo and Car Geek, which is a name I like. When are we going to get proper multi-core and graphic card acceleration on PC and maybe with Mac? To them, it is already obvious that the software isn't fully optimized, but with AI already there and going to get exponentially more and more powerful, using 100% of hardware resources is going to be crucial.
Yeah. That's the journey we were just talking about. Continuously use everything that's available to us. Again, for Photoshop, it's always used as the benchmark for a new device, like how fast is your Photoshop running. The reality is at times, just because you have a GPU or you have multiple cores doesn't mean you always get better performance. Because one of the tricks that's happening when you have multiple cores is you have to take a task, you have to break it down. So if I have a 4 or 8 core, I have to take a task and break it across 4 or 8 cores and get that task to be completed and back faster than maybe doing it just on one single core. So that's constantly what our engineers are doing. Is like, more does not always equal that I can get the results faster to you. So we're always leaning on what is the customer experience, what's the best thing for them. But we do go through our product and are always looking for ways that we can take advantage of the latest processing. And, we have like certain features fully go on the GPU, other ones don't. Certain actions like export and Lightroom and Camera, like they fully use all the GPUs. So because it's like, oh, these are like background processes. If you just shot over the weekend, you want 100 images, it's like I can fire up all the GPUs because you don't necessarily need them in any certain order. Yeah. I don't need to get them back to you in your canvas so that you can then keep doing, your next iteration on it. So by far, there are definitely things that you can do faster, but we absolutely do. Take advantage of that all the time.
That was something I was thinking about quite a bit in this, because I'm definitely a person who will use a tool, and if it's not really responsive or work well, I will never go back and try it again. And I think we see this in a lot of comments and things like that. Like, this particular feature is very slow or whatever. And it's like, well, have you tried it recently? And it's like, no, I tried it a long time ago. And I mean, that is one of the nice things about having constantly updated software. There is something we were discussing today that I wish it was more clear to users when we're seeing major performance updates. Like, we hear all the time about this is the new feature or something like that. But I mean, it would certainly be nice to have a better idea of like, and blank feature is now, twice as fast or whatever, even if you haven't upgraded your computer hardware.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's just a lesson for us is that we can spend way more time sharing those details, or really, you have to just search on websites and things like that, or maybe now just ask the different assistants. I was talking to one of my
Is this
colleagues,
faster now? Yeah.
And we were asking a question, and he's like, I don't know, let's ask, Gemini. And I'm like, what are you talking about? So yes, I think we can definitely do a better job, but I will also just add that yes, performance is something like always at the top of our list. It's something that we know, like we have incredibly demanding customers.
No.
Maybe that's why they're so passionate about their questions, right? Incredibly demanding customers that they have, as much as they love the tool, what they love is creativity. They love to get their artwork, their expression out there. And so anything that we can do to smooth that process, make it faster for them, that's what we want to do. We literally don't, I did have a joke with one of my engineers one time, and I said, when you write code, do you just put these random lines in it to slow it down so that when I ask you to make it faster, you're like, oh yeah, Maria, I worked so hard. Until you take a line out and you're like, look, magically it's faster now. And
that's a great trick.
They didn't really answer me, so I wonder maybe they are doing that. That's a really good trick, right?
I'm gonna use that.
That engineer knows who they are, and you're on notice.
Yeah.
So
for the articles I write, I'm just gonna get even more verbose than I am now.
Please don't.
And then you'll be like,
please don't, Chris.
Yeah.
I'll just tighten it up. And you'll be like, what's going on?
It's great. It's totally great.
Until I run out of words to cut, and then it's going to be like a Hemingway novel.
What I'll say that kind of piggybacks on what Jordan mentioned is and we're not talking about video today because Maria is not in the video team, so we will discuss video in the future.
As much as I love video,
Yeah,
I'm not your expert, and I want you to have the expert.
Correct. So, but what I will say is, for a long time, Premiere had this stigma, and probably still does among many people, of being crash prone, just constantly crashing. Yeah. And since switching over to M series, which has been years now, 3, maybe more,
4 years now.
Premiere's never crashed for me.
That's
but
awesome.
I think that it crashed for so many people for so long that they just now just believe it's crash prone.
Yeah,
even though they
to
haven't
your
used
point, we definitely measure our crashes. We call them abnormal exits as well. And if you just look at them in aggregate, you could be like, we're doing pretty good. It's only like, less than 5%. What you need to then look at is, but for like a single user, how many times are they crashing?
Yeah.
Right.
So when you look at the data from a different angle, it starts to unlock like, oh, it's certain devices or certain, componentry. And then that's when we can go in and start to fix it. So we're super proud right now that some of the crash rates and abnormal exits that we've seen on Photoshop for at least the last 2 years have been the lowest that we've ever had.
I can't remember the last time Adobe crashed on me. And I sometimes, for our thumbnails, I don't know why I do this to myself, but I will make a new folder and I just keep the assets from every thumbnail that I've made for you. That PSD is very large.
Right.
It is very large.
And I'm just seeing how big I can get it to get.
Before you get an abnormal exit.
Oh, you're trying to see how big of a
It hasn't crashed yet, but it did say like this saving might take a while once. And I was like, well, I did ask you to go up to, I think, 16-bit. And then also
How big is that file?
It was approaching like 700 gigs.
That's impressive.
It hasn't crashed.
That's a great test file.
Was that a whole weekend, or how much of your free time did you dedicate to it?
It's been over
I think
time.
it sounds like it's like a 10-year-old file.
No, it's only a year and a half.
Oh, okay.
But it's a 700 gig file.
And not anymore. I deleted
Just my face.
Oh, well, sometimes you're holding products.
Wow.
The second question in this group is from Georgina. How would you say that?
Sorry, we're doing our best.
Georgina? There we go. Is the sound I was looking for.
Georgina?
Will Lightroom on iPad ever have feature parity with Mac and Windows, especially with iPad's SoCs becoming more and more powerful? If not, how does Adobe decide what features are available on iPad? Now, this question actually snuck away from me because I have like at least 3 others that are also asking about feature parity. I'm also
asking. Yeah.
So I guess what I'll do is I'm going to play a speak pipe as well. This one's from Don Luter, and we'll listen to that, and then we can kind of touch back on this. So let's listen to it.
Hey, Jordan, Jaron, and Chris. This question is for Adobe when you go on to interview them. When the product is now called Lightroom was first introduced in 2017, we were told it would eventually reach feature parity with the product now called Lightroom Classic. However, 7 years later, Lightroom still lags behind Lightroom Classic in many areas. This would be tolerable if Lightroom Classic integrated well with Adobe's cloud system, but it doesn't. Since I prefer to travel with my iPad rather than my Mac, I'm constantly tripping over the inconsistencies between Lightroom Classic, Lightroom on the iPad, and Adobe's cloud. Do they plan to bring feature parity between the two products? If so, when? Thanks a lot.
And after I got all these questions, I put out on Threads, and I got a lot more response than I thought I was going to. That I said, because I'm not a Lightroom user, I'm a Bridge and Photoshop user.
Right.
You don't use Bridge or Photoshop, you only use Lightroom. But I wanted to know.
But you're also a Lightroom Classic user.
I'm a Lightroom Classic user.
And what are you?
I'm a Capture One user.
I'm so sorry, Maria. We were like, should we even bring them?
So I would like to read. I asked, like, what's missing, and because I didn't know. So here's what I was told.
Yep.
Calibration panel isn't there. Virtual copies are missing. Importing into a base local folder, including local cataloging and organization. Naming photos on import. Collections and smart collections. The ability to set custom aspect ratios. Curves on masks. Limited control of lens corrections exist. The panorama function is not complete. HDR merge. Sky replacement. Tethering. Plugin registration, file naming are all issues pointed to Lightroom versus Lightroom Classic. And a lot of the ones that I didn't put in here are all like an interface usability workflow thing. So there's clearly, I think the where there is parity is like how to edit a picture. Those things.
And output is,
those are the
HDR
same.
has parity.
But it's all like workflow stuff.
Yeah.
Just isn't there. Yeah. So with those two questions in mind and all that information I just dumped on your lap.
Yeah.
Why?
Okay. So Lightroom Classic, incredible application. It is one of our most heavily used applications. The customers that use it are incredibly passionate about it. They do tend to be more professional photographers, very serious hobbyists. A lot of things that you listed, probably the average mobile photographer has no idea what you're talking about. So we definitely see that. And I probably already have that list. I definitely already have that list.
There's probably more that's on there.
No,
well, because you follow Jaron on Threads. So
exactly. And we talk to our customers. So we definitely know the feature gap. When we built the Lightroom system, we'd made a decision that it was going to be cloud first. Most professional photographers didn't want a cloud first system.
Yeah.
That is accurate.
That's why I don't use it.
Yeah, exactly. I get it.
Even though you can now save locally with
Sure, but we were like, then we won't disrupt that workflow. But we also saw a trend where people wanted things in the cloud and they wanted to use it across multiple devices, like your iPad, like your phone, or just even in the browser, like we demoed for you earlier today. So we started to develop that system. And there was always the question, what happens with these two systems? And we said, we're going to follow our customers. We're going to let them decide. Some of them that were Classic users are like, this is better for me. We attracted some new users into the system.
Right.
So we have now two very healthy product systems and customers that use it. But like you're also mentioning, over time, we've been adding things to both. So the things that this user needs are actually a little bit over here. So we've been giving them more abilities to store things to the cloud, use their iPhone or their iPad with it. The customers over here are like, hey, I want to store some things locally. So we started to do that as well. Now the gap between them is getting a lot smaller, and we're trying to decide where do we go from here. So I'm just being really candid and perfectly honest with you. We don't know exactly where to go. We're constantly giving those customers what they want. We're not taking anything away from the Lightroom Classic user. Generative remove, denoise, all our new features still go into Classic.
Right.
We've added tethering to Lightroom Desktop. Like, it's like crazy. You're kind of doing it in two places. Yes, after a while, you're going to be like, you can't keep doing it in two places.
Is it going to reach a point where you have to have cloud access to use the product the way that you guys intend it to be used?
I don't think you have to always have cloud access. I think people are definitely choosing when. Like, even on the mobile device, we have it now where you don't have to import your entire camera roll. We allow you to selectively add things. And we're looking at relationships where people store their images in other places and allow you to do the same, selectively add them to Lightroom. So we did start at a point with the Lightroom system to say, no, we wanted everything in our cloud.
Right.
And we've evolved to a place where, people actually want to choose. And so I think that's kind of changed the relationship between Classic, because Classic always wanted a little bit more of that hybrid.
Right.
So we're offering the two products. We're allowing you to use and explore both. And then over time, we'll continue to ask that same question. Is it enough yet? Do you still want more? Because workflows continue to evolve. So some of the things that you might have needed before, like we talked about metadata, I've seen some people's metadata files. It's crazy. But now you're like, wait, this AI metadata is pretty darn good. Maybe I don't need to do that. So I do feel like the workflows will continue to evolve. And so the question will be, we'll stay very closely aligned to our customers and see what the right thing to do for them is.
It was my understanding early on when I think it was originally Lightroom Mobile, and then it was sort of, then they decided we needed one platform that could be more flexible and go across multiple things.
Yeah.
The code base for Lightroom, what was called CC and is just Lightroom now, is newer and different than the code base on Lightroom Classic.
It is.
And it's so therefore more flexible. Is there a particular reason why you can't take everything that's in Lightroom Classic, just put it in Lightroom, retire Lightroom Classic, have completely the same and the ability to toggle what you want and what you don't want. That way you don't have this confusion, you don't have two versions, and you have a more future-proof code base.
So you want to just build our product?
There's no way this is a unique idea.
You could, by far, you could just start dumping everything over there. But then what do you do with the users that don't need all those things? Did you just make their Lightroom harder to use, less approachable, not as efficient for them?
But if all the features are in the same place and do the same thing in the new version, you can just choose not to use some of the cloud stuff or whatever. I don't know.
Oh, no.
How.
So, yeah, we call it like lift and shift. If I took everything out of Lightroom Classic and just dumped it into Lightroom Desktop, yes, you're right. You could say, like, well, shouldn't those classic users come over, right? So, yes, millions of classic users could come over. What do I do with the Lightroom users, the non-classic users that don't want all that complexity?
Well, they should be able to ignore it, can't they?
Right.
You would be shocked how much I ignore in Photoshop.
So that's the part. That's where it's not so simple,
Got
for
it.
sure. It's like, yes. If it was that easy, you're right. I should have done it a long time ago. It isn't that easy.
And I guess I sort of stole your question, Jonas. This was in an email.
Okay.
Why does Adobe still maintain both classic and non-classic? What is the future plans for these products? It seems to a layman like myself, not Jonas, it seems inefficient to develop and support two separate versions. Why not just add cloud support to classic and eventually merge the two into a unified version? As a non-professional photographer, I find the differences between the two confusing, and it seems like both versions have stagnated as a result.
So they definitely have not stagnated. We do update and release things, new features to them all the time, new innovations. Even though you're an ACR user, an Adobe Camera Raw user, a lot of the core innovations actually start in ACR, and that is the develop module for both Classic and Lightroom.
Yeah.
So that's one way that you don't stay behind because you've chosen to use it as a Camera Raw, and that everybody gets the latest advantages. And then specifically on those platforms, we will do things specifically for those different products.
I got that question so many times, and I put like 3 versions of them in here to express that people are very much confused by it.
Yes.
And I actually, for the first time in a while, I was noticing folks actually wondering why we even need 2 versions. When before, the last time I feel like I asked this, they were like, don't you touch my classic. And now they seem a little bit more open to like having 2 versions seems super weird.
I mean, that's kind of what we talked about before, right? There's a big challenge having to serve many different users. I mean, I'm a Windows desktop user at home, but then I want that same capability for the iPad. So that I'm hoping for a very similar situation where I can work seamlessly as much as possible.
Yes.
But at the same time, like I remember, and this is going way back, but when I first tried Lightroom CC, right? Now it's not called CC. When I first tried Creative Cloud, I was turned off. I was like, oh, this is horrible. I had a bad experience. I never want to do this again.
Yeah.
And it's interesting how that will then solidify your resolve to stay with, in this case, Classic. Because you're like, that was so terrifying. I never want to do it again. Like, that was such a weird alien workflow. And I'm sure now it has changed quite a bit. So I think as a user, I have to then commit to now saying, look, maybe I should give it another try, put that effort into trying that program again.
I would love you to give another try. And I would also suggest that maybe
I'm scared.
I don't like change.
And you know what?
Well,
I'm not alone. A lot of people don't like change.
No, totally.
And that's fair.
You could even say, like, there's some people that are hardcore Nikon users versus Canon users. Both cameras shoot like incredible images, but somehow this is like, I just prefer one style.
Photographers in general don't like change often. I think it's like a
But we have people on our team too. Like it's not like the red team versus the blue team. Like we have people on our team that love Classic, love the way it works, just because that's what they grew up on.
Yeah.
Other ones that were a little bit newer to photography are like, no, this is perfect. This is exactly that's Lightroom.
Honestly, a lot of software companies would probably just say, Classic gone.
Yes.
This is new. Deal with it.
Deal with it. Right. Yeah. And we just,
like
I said, the Classic users to us are some of our most loyal, most avid users. And we just, that didn't feel right to us. Yeah. We wanted to keep giving them a product that supported their creativity and photography.
Right.
And we will continue to do that. we are on this journey to figure out how to, because you're right, it would be more efficient for me to bring them together.
Yeah.
They are two different code bases. It'd be different if you said it's one code base and it's just slightly, but yes, they are two different code bases. I have two different teams on it.
Yeah.
And we've been looking for ways to like develop once and deploy it to both. So we're looking for some innovations in that process. But no, I would definitely welcome us to do a deeper dive on this topic, as well as, because I have people on my team, that they can both do that translation. They can be like, here's what you do in Classic. Let me help you understand what you would do in Lightroom. And you can see, like, you can judge and be like, that's super helpful, Maria. If you could show me the translation path, that might be enough, because I might not actually need all those other things anymore that I thought I was demanding.
Because that's kind of what my question earlier is about, is like, as a Classic user, I don't want to feel like I'm paying the money and missing out on some new features that might only come to cloud-based programs, right?
Yep.
I don't want to miss out on new AI tools and stuff like that. And I mean, so far we haven't, but is that going to be an issue going forward? Like,
I think the only issue would be just the limitations of the platform, the code base or the technology. But we definitely continue to strive for that. But let's definitely do that follow-on like Lightroom Classic and Lightroom Desktop, and how they could evolve.
Yeah, by the way, today was the first time that any of the three of us heard it called Lightroom Desktop.
I know, I'm like...
Because Classic is used on it. So I do actually think a major help would be a branding shift. Because the word Classic, I can tell you right now, if I was to try it. So a friend of mine just recently got into photography. He bought a Nikon Z8, and he's asking me questions. And the first thing is, what do I edit in? Do I Lightroom? What is Lightroom Classic? Do I need Photoshop? Like, if maybe one was just like Lightroom and then Lightroom Pro, something that made more sense to like what people are used to seeing.
We're not alone either. I mean, a lot of the comments and questions, they're saying CC, right? I mean, which you haven't used for years.
Yes.
But it's just like that.
Or even imagine, like you said, you're someone new and you're searching for tutorials.
Yeah.
And then you're like, I'm watching this tutorial and I have no idea.
This doesn't even look like my program.
This doesn't look like, am I in the wrong version? Yeah.
Well, and for people subscribing too, like I mentioned that earlier today, I had a situation where I needed to do lens tests. So I hopped on, took a look at the feature lists, grabbed, at the time, CC, and then found out like, oh, that's not in it. Unsubscribed from that, subscribed to Classic at that point. And I think it would be really straightforward just to have a straight, this is available in this, and this is available in this, right on the Adobe site, where I had to go find another website to be like, oh, well, I want to print, and I need to be able to do different lens profiles. Things like that, I think, would just make it easier for people when they're signing up.
Two of these questions are somewhat related, we talked about, but I do want to make sure that they're heard. One is from Alex JOWX. Is there any Lightroom development team left with a clear strategy? Because Classic is feeling left for dead with an aging UI and worsening performance. And then another one that is similar is Kunal Kumar, who says, what are the plans for Classic? The functionality is great, but the interface has become clunky and slow and has issues where some features don't work all the time. I don't know how you would want to approach that, because you honestly don't know what they're running up against, but the idea is that Lightroom Classic, the UI is dated and feels slow.
So again, I would say that, we're not doing anything to intentionally slow down one product over another. We're not doing anything to disadvantage one. We genuinely are building the best products for those markets. And those markets are different. They have different passions, but then they have a lot of things that overlap. And so when they overlap, we're definitely trying to make sure that I can deliver them to both platforms at the same time. But there's not like some other strategy going on.
You're not purposely bringing one program down to get people so frustrated that they're like, okay, well,
it's incredible. The people that use Lightroom Classic, their CSAT, their NPS are like through the roof.
Like the clunky, slow interface, because that's what I'm used to. That's the whole reason why I still stick with it. I would have a hard time.
Clunky and slow.
Here's what I'll say. Since I do it's me and Jeremy do all of our computer testing, and we benchmark in Lightroom, and we have a very specific test that we keep doing. I can tell you that the platform is getting faster with your computer. So if you're using an old machine, yeah, it's still going to be slow, but I promise you, if you get a newer machine, specifically I can talk about M-series laptops, processes in Lightroom go ridiculously fast.
I don't have any speed issues.
There used to be it was either an export or an import task. I don't have the chart in front of me, but it used to take like 35 to 40 minutes to do this task, and now it takes less than 2 minutes on the newer platforms.
But it is hardware dependent, like any software.
Yeah, so just bear in mind, if you're complaining about the software, make sure you've actually looked at your hardware, because that is going to be a huge bottleneck. Yeah. Especially if you're using like an old, like the last generation Intel MacBooks.
I was going to say, like, I do time lapse all the time. So I would apply batch edits to a massive number of raw files before kicking it out. And on those Intel Macs, that was brutal, horrendous. But then even on the first M1, Chris and I did some tests on it, and suddenly you could actually see the results before you even started exporting, and it was much faster. So it does scale to your technology.
If you have a Windows laptop that sounds like a jet engine, it's pretty quick too.
But who would want one of those, especially if they're on a YouTube channel where sound's important?
Well, all right, so this is actually builds on that question. This is from Lucas Franowski. When is Lightroom Classic tethering support coming to Mac M-series chips? Are you working to improve the stability of tethering on Windows?
Yes, we continue to support tethering because that is one of the key workflows for pro photographers. Absolutely.
Can you tether with M-series chips? I actually don't know.
That's a good question. I'd have to look that one up too. But I know I've personally seen. Obviously, I get to see things before you guys get to experience them, and I've definitely seen experiments and tests on tethering with our products.
Okay, moving on. The feature parity we covered. Oh, here's one. Jonas had a second part to his email. Over 10 years ago, I don't remember the exact timing, Lightroom introduced a new import dialog, but quickly reverted it due to widespread criticism. Why hasn't there been any significant improvement or revision to the import process since? I guess he's wondering, were you scared off by that response and decided to never change again?
That was Lightroom version 6, where we made some pretty different changes to the import. And yeah, got a lot of feedback. I mean, I think that just proves that we listen to our customers. We went in a direction, we listened to our customers, and we made the decision to revert back to the experience that they wanted, that they loved. We will continue to make changes, but we are a bit more cautious to test it way in advance before we release it.
Cool. All right, so that is it on the Lightroom questions that I've got.
Can we take
a lot? They were all.
Everyone want to take a drink of water.
Yeah. Those are all kind of riding the same theme. But all right, so this next set. They're all about pricing, the concept of a perpetual license, and general business strategy. You can do your best to answer these because I know you don't make all those business decisions. You just help lead the teams. But you're the one here, so we're going to ask you. The first one is a speak pipe from Spencer Lupel. And so we're going to listen to that.
Hey, PetaPixel, this is Spencer calling from Germany. I hope you're doing well, and I was hoping you could ask Adobe a question for me. I'm sure there's a lot of other people who want to know. Would they consider releasing a light version of Lightroom and maybe even Photoshop? The reason is I used to be a professional photographer and shoot a lot of RAW files, but I don't do that anymore. In fact, I have a Fujifilm and I shoot JPEG a lot. But there comes a time sometimes when I want to be able to edit some RAW files. And what I did, instead of getting a subscription because I find it too expensive, I'm not interested in AI, and the whole surveillance thing kind of turned me off a little bit, especially. I would like to have a version of the software that doesn't have security issues of the old stuff, because I'm using Lightroom 5 right now, and they just don't offer that. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe this is not a good harm reduction strategy. There's a lot of us out there who would be willing to pay a little bit, but maybe just not as much. And why aren't they doing it? There's no option for us, really. Just as sort of like a hobbyist thing. Maybe they can find a way to cripple the software so it doesn't cannibalize their other markets. But I'd really like to know what they have to say to this. And I appreciate you asking. And best of luck in your interview.
I think it brings up a lot of really interesting questions. When we made the journey from perpetual to subscription, it was a very thoughtful process where we looked at the advantages to continuously deploying and developing our product, providing some new services and capabilities, and it was well received. It was really well received by the market. I don't deny that there are definitely customers that want another alternative. We do continue to listen to that and understand. I think the market continues to evolve and change. Right now, again, can't announce anything, but But we're definitely seeing both the advantages of subscription, and we believe our customers are seeing that advantage as well. And we're always looking for being open to hearing, I want I want as many people in the world to experience our products as possible. And so we try to deliver them on different devices. We try to provide, freemium experiences so you can do a certain amount of things. So I think we just have to continue to look at that and see how the market evolves and changes.
I guess to sort of further the question, I personally wouldn't be interested in a product like this, but maybe some customers would. Like, is there value in having a perpetual license for a very basic but Adobe branded program?
You did one. I don't know if you're still doing it, but Elements was that.
Oh yeah, Elements.
Elements still sells, and they sell perpetually.
Yeah. So is that what he's looking for? Because Elements is a pretty bare bones, stripped down version of Photoshop.
Possibly. Elements, I believe, also ships with Camera Raw, so there's probably some camera support in there. So you could say we could check out Elements.
I mean, worst case scenario, you still offer DNG converter. They could just run those through and push it through Elements.
I mean, this particular person's not even doing RAWs, right? Like they just want.
They said they want to dabble with RAWs once in a while.
Sometimes they.
Yeah. Well, on this note, actually, because you kind of touched on the subscription thing, from Waylon, they say, as much as I don't like subscriptions, I do enjoy the photography plan. I would love a $20 build your own plan option, like choose 3 apps for that price. I really enjoy the remix function of Adobe Audition and like to create my own wallpaper with Illustrator, but I can't afford to spend $46 a month for a hobby. And that I actually kind of think is a decent solution. Like, what if I want Photoshop, Premiere, and Lightroom? Or in this case, Audition and Premiere and Photoshop. That would be neat. So I don't know if you can't really say if you're going to do it, but here's some feedback. This is what someone
totally.
would like.
I've definitely heard some of that feedback before about like sort of build your own bundles, choose your own. I do agree with the evolution of video. So again, not the video expert, but that people are like mixing and matching products more. Like
it used to be very separate, I'm sure, the Premiere user from the photo or the Lightroom user.
So I would imagine that we are continue to explore those options for sure.
I don't know. Maybe Adobe needs to make like a hybrid program, like an actual program that's a hybridized for the hybrid user.
Well, you actually I said someone today that you can theoretically do Lightroom, Photoshop, Audition, and Premiere all inside of Photoshop if you were a maniac. It does support.
I knew a wedding videographer who did his grading within Photoshop. I remember that.
I once actually did a tutorial for f-stoppers back in the day where I'm like, you can indeed color grade your video in Photoshop if you hate yourself. And you can still do that.
He was like, I do.
I do hate myself. All right,
that might be a separate issue.
That's why I like to do it.
I have a four-part question from a YouTube commenter named Peanut Trolls.
Good name.
Or Peanut Rolls. I think it's Peanut Rolls.
Peanut Rolls?
Yeah, it's a Peanut
Pinot
Rolls.
Otherwise, it's Peanut Trolls.
Yeah, it's Peanut Rolls.
Okay.
All right, so first question from Peanut Rolls. There are concerns that pressure from major shareholders and private equity may prioritize profit maximization over user needs. How does Adobe ensure that its decision-making remains independent and user-centric?
So again, I don't meet with shareholders. I meet with customers. My entire team meets with customers. We're looking at, what our customers' needs. And again, I'm just being really frank. Like, I've been in meetings where, if the product isn't ready for the customer, like the team will just say it's not ready. They'll just stop. And so there's not ever a moment where the customer isn't first.
So follow up. And you probably already answered this. Have you ever faced a situation where the demands of shareholders or investors conflicted with the best interests of users? And if so, how are those resolved?
So again, I don't meet with the shareholders. I'll let that happen at other levels. We're sometimes saying it's a higher pay grade, but I can feel the pressure from the executives. But by far, while Shantanu can overrule me, I'm there to represent our customers. I'm there to put forth, this is the product, this is the needs of our customers, and I'll allow our CEO and business leaders make that choice. But I haven't seen a decision where it's been that case. Great to hear if you've seen one, but I believe that we always choose our customers first.
I mean, I'm not in those rooms, so I wouldn't know. Adobe has been criticized for a lack of transparency in its decision-making processes. How does it plan to improve communication and transparency with its users going forward? Like doing podcasts with them.
Doing way more podcasts, hanging out with more people. Yeah, I don't think any of us can figure out what the root cause is. I don't know if it was, COVID years and we all just sort of like lived in our homes and in our, I don't know exactly what happened over the years. But I will say that, the last several months in particular have just made us all wake up. Like, we need to really, re-engage. And I'm not saying like we weren't engaged. I just think it wasn't enough or in places that were more obvious or, like you're saying, even more transparent.
Yeah.
So it's not like we weren't talking to customers, but we weren't broadcasting maybe that we were talking to customers, or we weren't holding certain kinds of events or appearing at certain kinds of events. But pretty continuously, the product teams were talking to customers. I think it's just maybe the difference between doing all that user research, talking to customers versus like being more out there about what we were doing.
I mean, certainly we've talked about this already a little bit, but obviously Adobe got a lot of kickback from the community, right? About the marketing mistakes and the issues and stuff. And I think those are valid. I mean, there's a lot of anger, it's super valid. But you're in a position where you also get feedback from your team. So can you speak a bit about how the teams have reacted to that kickback and what the customers are saying and the frustrations they're having?
Yeah, I think, again, our team is filled with photographers and creatives, so they understand. I think they were surprised when they saw some of the things. I was like, honestly, I don't sit on Adobe's website.
Right.
I do get targeted, with our ads because for whatever reason, whatever cookies are on my machine, but I don't really fixate on them. And so I think we were surprised when we saw them as well. But we weren't surprised by the reaction in some ways. We're like, oh yeah, of course, that makes no sense. And so everyone's been working internally to make sure that, either, run it by the product teams more, or how can we be more involved in it? How can we make sure that the customer's voice is more apparent in what we're doing? So it's just kind of like woken us up to just make sure that we're connecting even more with all the departments that we have. And, like I said, I don't want to blame everything on COVID, but I don't think people realize, like, when you are no longer walking around in buildings and bumping into each other.
Right.
And we're all in our own little boxes. Like, I think my connections did diminish because the people that I would see would only be the people that showed up in those little boxes in front of my computer. And so it'd be whoever I'm in the meeting with. So if you and I would, just randomly run into the lunchroom and strike up a conversation, well, unless we scheduled a meeting during those 3 or 4 years, I might never see you again.
Right.
So I felt like a lot of it was we just lost a lot of connection. And we're just starting to realize we just need to really work harder to rebuild that.
Right. And not just with customers, like that's with press agencies.
Everything.
And everything.
Everything. Like customers, even more, our own colleagues.
Yeah.
Like you were even saying, when was the last time you sat down with anyone from Adobe? Years.
Yeah.
I've been here for 26 years. How is that possible? But a lot's happened to both of us. And so, so yes, we're all just trying to reach out again and reconnect.
Yeah, I think that was really, it's kind of exciting for me is we have faces having come here, because Jared knew a lot of people when we were walking around.
I know, you could walk around like, I know the person.
Just like, hey, I haven't talked to you in quite a long time. Good to see you again. But that really opens up things for us, as we're kind of a conduit between the companies and our viewers and commentators and everything like that. So if there is a concern, like when the terms of service or the ad came out, it would have been great to just be able to jump on the phone and be like, hey, can I get a statement? Would be awesome or something. Yeah. And now,
or even help us explain it.
Yeah. It's just nice that those lines of communication are open. I think that's something.
We're doing it now.
Yes.
Thanks for fixing it.
There is one more question from Peanut Rolls.
Okay.
And you've kind of touched on it, but I'm going to ask because they asked, critics could argue that the subscription model prioritizes short-term revenue over long-term customer satisfaction. How does Adobe ensure that customer value remains central to its business strategy? I don't know if that's a question you can answer, but you're welcome to try.
It's going to sound like a repeat, but I just keep going back to, our job is to deliver new value to our customers. Every release that we've done in our product, every feature, every innovation that we do is in service to giving customers more capabilities. And if you haven't seen that, I'd be really surprised, but score us against that. I feel that every release we've done adds something new to the customer that they didn't have before that is helping their workflow, making them more creative.
The next two questions are from My Travel Info. Spotify has pricing for regions, like it's not the same for every region. Does Adobe have any plan to make it a little easier and lower pricing for users who live in some places in other parts of the world?
I believe we do have some tiered pricing, but again, I'm not the pricing expert, so I can't comment much more than that.
I just got to ask.
Yeah, sure.
$5 off for Canadians because we're just pleasant. Yeah.
Canadians are quite pleasant.
Yeah. And you have to add a cost.
That should be reflected in our pricing.
You have to add a cost to the transportation costs, even though it's software, across our vast distances.
This is probably another conversation.
Country, and then there's cold weather problems that adds another value. It's tough.
Jern?
This one actually is I think I'm just going to express it because I didn't include it earlier. But John112 Media says, could there be a Lightroom, Photoshop, Acrobat, and fonts bundle? The full suite is too expensive for me. So this is essentially as if he was allowed to make his
the
own.
a la carte kind of idea.
I think the a la carte thing is interesting. I'll definitely take that back.
I hear that term like a full stack creator a lot, and I do think there's a lot of people who would be mixing and matching products that wouldn't even 5 years ago.
I think
I agree.
And you can kind of look at the way that camera manufacturers have been making new products in the last few years, and the concept of hybrid is so important to them. Like almost everyone is doing something related to that and really pushing that they can do video as well as photo and vice versa.
Yeah.
So someone who is a modern creator can't actually just subscribe to the photography plan and use only Adobe. They would need a video editor of some kind, and it becomes a lot more expensive.
You'll never use that you're paying
Correct.
for,
Like to get the Premiere in there, you get a ton of stuff that you will never touch.
Yeah.
As someone who does use the full suite, I don't use even half.
Yeah,
of the apps that
I
have
agree.
access to.
I think when we first went to Creative Cloud, it's been about 11 years now.
I remember it vividly. Actually, I was in Los Angeles at the time.
Yeah, it's like at the time it was great. It's like, oh my gosh, you're bringing everything together for this, one monthly price. But I agree with you, and I think that's definitely some things that we're starting to look at is as things have evolved and changed, what are the right combinations of products and capabilities that people want? And maybe I've heard the suggestion a couple times now, maybe it is a build your own model. So I would say the fact that it's been over a decade, I think it is the right time for us to start to explore. Things have changed in the industry and customers are demanding different things. So back to one of the things we do is we listen to our customers.
Let's see what they do.
Yeah.
So this last one is related to a story that was published in 2017 where Adobe said that they would offer a standalone Lightroom independently and forever. So Michael Foth emailed and sent me this link where Adobe said we would never get rid of perpetual. And it says, I have been using Lightroom for over 10 years, but refused to get a new version after the last purchasable standalone version with no monthly fee. They promised to keep a standalone version of Lightroom and broke that promise. Do they intend to finally keep their word? For now, all my lenses and cameras are supported by my old Lightroom 6, but I see myself forced to leave Lightroom behind in the future with new cameras if they offer only subscription-based software and keep breaking their promise. And I will open this link up, and I'll show it's on screen right now. The company said that Lightroom 6 would be the final standalone version of Lightroom that doesn't require a subscription, backtracking on what the company said just a few years ago. So that was a long time ago, but there was a point where Adobe said we would support Lightroom as a standalone product forever and then didn't. And some people still haven't forgotten.
They haven't. I can sort of remember that time frame. I don't remember all the discussions that went into it. I have much clearer memories on, decisions like, do we even build Lightroom versus because we had Bridge, right? But that one is definitely fuzzy to me. I will say that, business models and ways of delivering software definitely evolve. But again, my job is to build features and products for our customers. So I promise to continue to do that. And I will help, our customers look for ways to get access to it. Like, you talked about the DNG converter. Like, we do care about the fact that we don't want you to like be abandoned or not have, not be able to bring your raw files in or support different formats. That's why we invented things like DNG. Or we have capabilities where if you decide that you no longer want to pay for Lightroom, it does default into a mode where you still have certain capabilities, because we always want you to be able to see and use your files, but we just won't let you to, go on and do further editing of assets. So we are thoughtful about like what you can continue to do and what you're not allowed to continue to do. And I think we just have to keep exploring that so that it makes sense. Like, like I said, I don't want you to not have access, like not be able to open a file, but further editing and advancements might be where the line is, or maybe we, reevaluate that.
Or you can just buy a Pentax or Leica. That's your other solution. And just shoot native DNGs. It'll work great on Lightroom 6. You're set.
So that's the end of the questions that we got from users. But my thoughts have been colored by the recent 24 hours. And I'm curious if you're okay talking about this, like how familiar you are with what Google announced yesterday, and if you'd be okay talking about like.
I'm actually not familiar with.
So I guess I can describe it to you and see what your thoughts are. So what Google's Gemini can now do is I'll take a picture, and I took it off kilter. So now, like it's looking like this, the background isn't great or whatever. It can now like center, reframe, and then like fill it in with generatively. But it doesn't stop there. Okay. Now I can also change the color of the background. Like I can make the sunset nicer. I can add a campfire to the foreground.
Right.
And I can do all these sorts of things, and it looks like a picture. Mm-hmm. And I'm just curious how you feel about like what does authentic imagery mean anymore. Mm-hmm. Like it's a conversation that is ongoing, and a lot of people want to know like when does a photo end. And then last year, actually earlier this year, some Samsung executive said there's no such thing as a real photo, which was not the smartest thing to say, because that upset a lot of folks. So I mean, this is just kind of this general idea of where imaging is going and like what is photography anymore, and like it's changing so quickly that it's hard to keep up. And I'm just wondering if you personally, or if you want to speak for your whole department, how you guys are looking at generative AI and how that affects what a picture is. Mm-hmm.
So there was a museum exhibit about, I want to say almost 10 years ago at the Met called Faking It. And it was basically image manipulation before there was a Photoshop. So I would say that, the human condition, human creativity has always wanted to manipulate what they saw. And I think back then they'd be painting on the negative, painting on the images, like all sorts of, and this whole exhibit at the Met just showed all these examples of image manipulation, multiple exposures, ghosting, all these techniques that people think was invented because of Photoshop, but actually always existed in creativity. Yeah. Photoshop just made it easier for you to do.
Right. I think that does say something. Yeah. It makes it a much more, if everyone can do it, it's different than like that one guy who actually understands how to develop a negative. It gets out there more.
It democratizes it, makes it easier, makes it even faster. Like if you had to sit there and paint on a negative, that could take quite a while. But I go back to that moment because I think about the fact that that's always been, I can't remember, I'd have to go back to the book as to the earliest known.
Is it the Cotswold Fairies? Where there's this little girl.
I think there was. I think it was like a monk, a picture of like a skyline, and he took something out of it. But it's like, but knowing that, I think it's like it's the human, drive to like change what they perceive or recommunicate an image. So I want to sort of separate, like, is it the technology or is it just our human drive to like re-express that image in our way? Now, I think then it's also should be on both the audience, the person seeing it, like, like me, like you did this to your image, and me, to then challenge, how was that made, right? Or you could be like, I'm going to tell you exactly how it was made. So I think that's where we need to have a conversation about, like, it's not like I said, it's always been there. People have always wanted to manipulate images. Right. It's now becoming increasingly easier and easier, to the point now where you're like, I could just talk to the computer and it just starts doing stuff, right? I'm not even using Photoshop, and you're like making all these incredible capabilities. So then what's now the contract between the artist and their audience? Does the artist then say, hey, just want you to know I use mixed media to create this? Or I, as a user, could be looking, as I'm looking at imagery, I'm like, oh, I'd like to know, how was it created? Now, you don't have to tell me like literally every layer or filter, but you have to say it was manipulated, right?
Some people won't, though, unless they're forced to. And even then,
but then it's back to the audience, right?
Instagram filters have already shown this.
Yes.
Like there are filters that make you look completely different that are indistinguishable from reality.
Yeah.
Like you don't look anything like that. So, and they don't reveal, oh yeah, by the way, I don't actually look like that. So like if someone can hide something, they will. And it's yes, Jordan?
Oh, I was just going to say, like, it really ties into our first conversation today, is we talked about, the CAI initiative, and I think that's incredibly important. Like, we can debate back and forth the merits artistically of how much you can alter an image, and it's still, the artist, but it needs to be, if something is presented as truth, then something that can verify that, I think, is incredibly important. And I'd really like to see more progress on that, like we were talking about. I was hoping that we would see major news organizations using these to confirm that an image is valid. I mean, we just had the Olympics. We've got an election. Well, you people have an election coming up.
We have an election coming, yes.
Where people are talking about using AI on images in the news. So I think we really need to see that move a lot faster, a way of actually verifying it. Because currently it feels like the capabilities are moving much faster than our ability to recognize what's been altered.
Yep.
How do you at Adobe and your teams manage that? That sort of conversation of how far do we go, or what do we not do? Like, how do you manage that situation?
Like, how far do we go with technology?
Sure. What would we let AI do? What would we not let AI? Because everybody has to deal with
Caleb's comment, right? As a boudoir photographer, who makes that call?
Everybody has to deal with these barriers. So, you must have some very interesting discussions about that in house.
There is one thing too that I noticed, and some folks say that Adobe wouldn't do this again if it happened now, and that was years ago. There was this sneak that you showed where you could change what somebody said.
Yes.
And Adobe was like, actually, that's a terrible idea. We're not going to do that, and it's already up. Somebody else did it.
Sure.
So then the argument was like, well, if that happened again, Adobe would see if somebody else is just going to do it. We may as well make the money and do it now, when it's not a necessarily ethical thing to do. So that's just an example.
Yeah. No. So a couple things. Like, yes, we did start the Content Authenticity Initiative, and we continue to get more, groups to join that initiatives and understand how to, create provenance and make sure the images are what people say they are. We do have what we call an AI ethics board, and they review various projects that we're working on and really ask ourselves, like, is this something that makes sense for Adobe to continue to pursue? So those are just some of the ways that we're trying to make sure. And we do this as a different team. So if I and my team had an idea, or if Adobe Research had an idea, we would go through a process to kind of pitch the idea or show the technology. So there was some work done early on where we were doing some manipulations on the face. So we could you've probably seen the demos where you have a face and you could age me or make me younger.
I do remember that distinctly.
So there's but then what they were noticing was that when sometimes you do that, the AI would change my ethnicity. And it'd be like, oh, wow, you're getting quite Caucasian as you're moving along.
That's a problem.
And so the ethics board would be like, that would be kind of offensive to start to lose somebody's ethnic background. And so even features as we develop them, we try to look at ourselves and be like, how would this offend someone, or what does it mean? And so we do try to bring in other voices. I think some of the things that we've been talking about with AI and generative, it's moving incredibly fast. Probably faster than any technology I've ever seen take off.
I would agree with that.
And I feel like the only way that we can, continue to safeguard or is to have those conversations, like you said. Let's be really open and candid about it. Give us the feedback. Adobe, I think you did wrong. That's what just happened. Adobe, you did wrong. gets everyone to pause for a moment. We look around and be like, okay, no, it wasn't, our intentions weren't wrong. We just didn't fulfill on how best to communicate it. Or maybe our intentions were wrong. But I think part of it now is just like, we just have to be really open to having those conversations and bringing in a lot of different voices. Because, different backgrounds or different ages, or they just have different experiences. And I think another thing is just to make sure that you have a diversity of thought coming in to help you.
Great.
I was just thinking that yesterday you were like, I think AI is going to make me really lazy. And
well,
I kind of wanted you to actually say something along those lines, because it is different than I think I've heard anyone talk about AI recently.
It happens on two levels. So interestingly, like using Lightroom, for example, generative removal, fantastic tool. Love it. I use it a lot. And it's not that it's because it's convenient. And it works really well, right? Like, there's a funny thing in the corner or whatever. I can just lop it off, replace it. It does a great job. Whereas when we look at it on the phone, it really does become a tool of ultimate convenience, right? Even to the expense of the image quality, where you're like, the image isn't quite as good, but I can do this in a really easy way. And I feel like we are becoming a convenience-driven society. That's obviously, I think, why this technology is so appealing, right? It's like you say, I'm sure when Photoshop was first developed, there was probably a huge uproar at that time. That was probably very similar to now. We're like, well, that's not photography. You're not doing film, you're not doing negatives. And you're right, we've been embedding images for...
I guess if you compare film shooting to digital shooting, I am very lazy.
Yeah.
Well, everybody said that, right? You're like, why am I shooting digital? It's because, it's nice, it's easy. I don't have to be in a darkroom. I can be in a Lightroom. That was the whole point of the name of your program.
I mean, I guess the hope is, are you doing other things with your time now? Do you find yourself...
Absolutely not, Maria. No.
Now he's scrolling on Instagram.
Then I'm sorry you are lazy. It's just like, the whole idea is like, if computers can do things where like, I don't have to like do the hard way, or like I don't have to cull through 1,000 images that I just took at my friend's wedding and find the ones that are blurry, or find the one like if it can take that off so I can get to the next thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what it should be intended to do. Or like I sometimes, like even with large language models and assistants, it's like, you should know me. I use you how many hours a day? You should be like, Maria always opens this first and then she does this next. So when it starts to do the conveniences so that I can then stay either focused or the term, like I can stay in my flow and like just get my work done, or it frees me. So now, wow, I got an extra hour to go like do something else instead of like sitting here culling through 1,000 images. Like that's, so my hope would be that the things that we're taking off your plate gives you the freedom to create more or do something else with your time. But if you choose to be lazy, that is your call.
I like to go with the self-deprecating answer, but I think that's obviously a very important feature for people is saving time or predicting things that you would have done anyways in a regular. But
just repetitive things. Like I keep going back to like 10 years ago, it took me a day to edit one of our YouTube episodes. Today, it takes me a day to edit our YouTube episodes, but I'm doing a lot more in it. Because the computers are better, the tools are better, and I think that's kind of the ideal. Is I'm making something better now. Hopefully, God, I hope so.
We've had these conversations on the podcast as well, and they're important on previous things, and it's important. Like everybody's gonna sort of land on what they're comfortable with as far as this goes. And I guess the way I look at AI photography, and we even talked about this with our Google review of this, our first look at this phone, is it does change things, and it's quite dramatic. And as you say, it's happening very fast. At the same time, I feel, because I've seen this industry for so many years, I've seen it change so many times. I've seen people be very scared about all of these transitions. And in the end, you're like, whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. And at the same time, creativity, it's hard to put boundaries on it, on what defines that, and what that final result is. So I try to look at it in a fairly positive way, or at least a way of like, I've seen this before. I'm not panicked, right? And it's up to me if I want to use it or not. So
that's how I look at it. I look at every technology change or advancement as an opportunity to, introduce something into your workflow, supercharge your workflow, take something tedious out of your workflow. Sure, I could get fearful of it. I could get tired and say, like, I'm done.
Yeah.
But I think I love the problem solving and the challenge of it. I love the idea that here's something radically different. Like I distinctly remember the first few times we saw the avocado chair, right? Like everyone's like, oh, look, you can create an avocado chair. And we're sitting here as the Photoshop team, and we're like, that's not what people want to do. Like, while everyone was running around and being like, Photoshop's dead because the avocado chair. And I'm like, it's not what people do. Like, do you have any idea what creativity is? And so people were like, like so many people were curious, like, why don't you just put this in your product? What's Adobe doing on this? Like, and you're like, but again, that's not what people are doing with creativity. And so when we did the generative fill, all of a sudden people were like, wait, what? And I'm like, this is what people want with generative. And the number one thing was not to add more things to the image. It was to remove things from an image. Right. But it was always your image. It wasn't avocado chair, right? It wasn't like some like, I get it. Like oftentimes Photoshop is associated with surrealism. And maybe before DALL-E could do that, somebody did make an avocado chair. But the reality is, how many times do you need that?
Right.
What you need is like your unique vision, your base image, take this image of the scene, change our background, make us all wear matching, sparkly jackets, like whatever it is, if that's your vision, like it usually starts with something that you have or have access to, and then you want to do something. It doesn't just always start. Now, again, there is a whole stream of art where it's just like brand new visualizations of concepts. But the vast majority is your image making it closer to what you imagine. Like when I take some photos, I'm just like, I didn't really imagine all those phone lines in it. Like I know they exist in the world, but it doesn't really make my image look better. So could we get rid of all the phone lines? Yeah. And so it's like that. It's like, what is my intention, and what can the tools do to help me with that?
Maria, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you for proving that Adobe does indeed have humans at it, and that they do care, that they are making things.
We saw so many humans.
Yeah. So one thing that I do want to make clear is that the people that are making the product, and I've known this for a while, but it's just been so long since I'd actually seen them, that there are people who are very passionate about making the software, and they aren't necessarily the ones that you've been hearing from. So I'm glad that Adobe is coming and talking to us again and actually showing you that they do exist and they do care and they are working to do the things for you. Some of the questions that she wasn't able to answer is she doesn't talk to those shareholders who make those decisions and pressure a company to do certain things. She's focused on her product, and her teams do the same thing. So
we should also answer, we had some other questions as well, and those are going to be answered separately with more detail than you can do on the podcast.
The more like links to helpX and more details for sure.
Yeah, so she wasn't necessarily the best person to ask about the video questions we got. And there are some other questions that are like, we needed to go talk to a Lightroom specialist who had the specific answer. And those are things that we're going to put, there will be a link in the description below to the story that will be on PetaPixel that will include this podcast, as well as the answers to some of those questions. And hopefully we'll be hearing more questions over time. We'll have more opportunities to talk with Adobe. And this is only the beginning of what will be a renewed conversations between
you are welcome to hang out with us anytime.
Thank you for having us.
We're
really
happy to go to Canada as well.
Please.
All right, well, with that, thanks for joining us, everyone. We'll catch you next week. Have a good one.